Dzień dobry. Nazywam się Joanna Leśnierowska, a to jest kolejny odcinek z serii Co nam zrobi taniec, którą realizujemy razem z Warszawskim Obserwatorium Kultury w oczekiwaniu na otwarcie pierwszej instytucji dla tańca w Warszawie. W rozmowach z moimi gośćmi pochylamy się nad zagadnieniami sprawczości i odpowiedzialności choreografii i tańca. A dziś moją rozmówczynią jest Angela Conquet. Od ponad 20 lat Angela pracuje jako programatorka, kuratorka i badaczka tańca i choreografii. Przez wiele lat prowadziła Dom Tańca w Melbourne w Australii, a do swojej pracy włącza perspektywy zarówno programatorki, jak i artystki i menadżerki. Angela finalizuje także swoją pracę doktorską, która dedykowana jest analizie mechanizmów i dynamiki programowania i prezentowania tańca współczesnego. Badając praktyki i strategie kuratorskie, Angela pyta o wpływ, jaki mogą one mieć na kształtowanie gustów publiczności, na kariery artystów, a także na szerzej rozumianą ekologię tańca. I to właśnie ten kontekst jest punktem wyjścia dla naszej dzisiejszej rozmowy, która została nagrana w języku angielskim. Gorąco zapraszam. Hello, Angela. Thank you very much that you found the time to talk to me and share your thoughts on the agency of choreography and dance and drawing from your broad experience as a dance professional, director of a dance house and freelance curator, it would be super interesting to collect the thoughts around the question, what is the choreographic agency, what choreography can do for us, not only for artists, but also for audiences, for wider communities. And maybe let's start from that. Do you believe that choreography can help to heal the world or let us be different in the reality through the contact with dance and choreography?
Well, absolutely, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing this this job. I think for me the question is, it's not a question. It's something that's so obvious that when we speak about dance and choreography, firstly, it's about everyone because we all have a body, and this is the art form or the disciplines that work essentially with the body. And then choreography exists in everyday life, whether we call it like this or whether we see it like this. So in the second we move, there is a choreography that our body performs. There's an urban choreography because when we step outside, we have to move in certain ways because, there's a one-way road or a two-way road, or it's smaller or it's larger. So this is already choreography. But I think what for me is really important to remember is that each time we speak about dance and choreography, which I see as two different art form almost, but it's an invitation to return to the body and to think through movement. And for me, this is where it becomes interesting. And it's not only about the shows that we see on stage, it's about how we understand what this thinking, this awareness of one's own body or the sensations that we experience when we look at other bodies moving, whether it's in a show, in a spectacular kind of context, or even observing people on the street, what it does to us. And for me, it's like really developing this a muscle, where the more you work it, the more you feel and the more you think. And it's almost like, the more you practice your yoga routines, the better you get at it, or the more you go to, I don't know, the more you run, the longer you can run. So for me, it's that kind of it's almost like a dimension that you acquire. It's like you learn to think and feel differently. So yes, I would say, very, very, very briefly, dance and choreography is part of everyone's life because we all have a body and we all move. So yeah.
So what does it really mean to have a house in the town that is dedicated for dance and choreography? And by the way, I'm quite interested to hear, how do you define dance and choreography as two different art forms?
Well, I think for me, firstly, if we're looking at dance as an art form, as a discipline, I think it's important to remember that it's one of those art forms where it requires a certain equipment or a certain setup if we want to do it well. Um, it requires, proper floors. It requires um, certain conditions that are about looking at what to preserve the well-being of the professional bodies that work in this field. Um, I think it's also important to give visibility to a discipline. There are so many, obviously, in let's say Western Europe, we have a tradition of these dance houses, which were, to look back historically, they were the result of a political, cultural policies and a political will to invest in this art form at a moment in time, I think, where artists, but also, I guess, institutional representatives were not necessarily so excited anymore about just theatre, or, you know, uh, there was something that was happening that needed to make space for this art form, and then these houses appear. But I don't think it was just necessarily to give the discipline a place to exist. It was more a discipline. It was more about creating a point of gathering and bringing people to this art form.
Mhm.
So I think it's nice to look at I would say probably 20 years of, if not longer, 30 years of dance houses that exist. I think the one of the oldest ones were the Place in London, which is a dance house, and also I think the one at the Maison de la Danse in Lyon is also one of the oldest, so over 30 years. I think it's interesting to see what they represent today and how they have built generations of very sophisticated audiences that have had the opportunity to come and engage with this art form over long periods of time. I think it's also interesting to see what happens when you do not have a dance house, and I'm thinking particularly, because more recently I was in Romania, and it's been 30 years, 20 years that they've been trying, or 25 years that they've been trying to open a dance house, and there was a space, then was taken back, and now the discipline, the artists and the artists are all scattered and trying to exist with more in different spaces with different more volatile spaces, but it's the thinking is scattered as well, and you can't really build anything if you don't have a point of landing. And as for my research, for my thesis, I interviewed about 25 presenters, who half of them were directors of dance houses all over the world. And I love what Anne Davier said about le pavillon de la danse in Geneva, where she said, look at this house, look at this building, which is it was a whole saga to get to build that place. And it's now it's a temporary building, because it can be dismantled and it leaves no trace. It's part of its green policy, but it sits in one of the most central squares of central parts of the old city. And she says, up on a hill, and it says this place is now the lighthouse of the city. And I think it's beautiful, because people can see it, people can be curious about it. If they don't want to go in because they don't think it's for them, there are so many things that happen outside of that, outside, or in other spaces, but it has the banner of this pavilion, and it's a point of gathering. And if dance does something really well, it's this invitation that it extends to people to be together, because it's this is what is really important about the dance, the temporality, the temporal invitation. It extends to audiences in this moment together in time, whether it's 1 hour or 2 hours for a show. It's this it's what we call, in a more theoretical way, this invitation for a somatic attention. You're together, and together we co-create a sensorial being in common. And that's really unique to dance. It can't happen if there isn't a space for that, and a space that's regular, because it's also about regularity. If it keeps changing, and today we go to, let's see something at the, I don't know, art museum, and the next day we go and see something at, like, I don't know, whatever whatever theater in whatever performing arts center that, it's not identified as dance, it doesn't do the same thing as coming. It can become a house, can be a house, but it doesn't become a home until people invested and inhabited. And I think that's also that's what is important, I think, to understand from a funding perspective or from a architectural perspective as well. It's what does it mean to have this presence. It's about presence, I think, and the regularity of being able to engage with this presence when you're ready, or when you're curious, where you feel like it, or when somebody comes and takes you by the hand and invites you in. So all these possibilities are there, but there needs to be an anchorage, and usually dance houses do that. And as you know, they are very different models. They are very, I think, they can go for the most institutionalized institution to very porous and artist-led or artist-centric organizations, as I like to think mine was in Melbourne. So I think it's like all houses, they come in different shapes and forms, and the hospitalities they extend are also shaped by the people who run them and the artists that inhabit them. So you can make it a wonderful act of presence.
It's a very beautiful that you brought in Pavillon de Danse at the Genève, because this is in a very special place for us in the project that we are running now in Warsaw, that will lead to opening, hopefully, let's cross fingers still, a first ever dance institution in Warsaw, because the building, the pavilion that we are adapting and gonna use in Warsaw is exactly of the same measures as Pavillon in Genève. And I had a pleasure to bring an architect from Warsaw to Genève and meet with Anne and José, the technical director, who were there building the Pavillon in Genève, to share all their smart solutions and philosophies we could reapply in the building in Warsaw. So we already feel connected with Genève so much as a kind of a sister building, and also a beautiful institution that really been in Genève for years, and just recently, more than 10 years ago, but still it's a quite recent situation, received this home. And the metaphor of lighthouse is extremely beautiful, and might be also super useful for Warsaw, because the pavilion is actually on the banks of Vistula River. So we do have a water, so the lighthouse is almost like natural in this environment. And I also hope that it will shine bright as a place of our gatherings of artists and audiences from Warsaw. I was just curious about sorry, I'm gonna go back to it, about this distinction between dance and choreography. It's an ongoing discussion in Poland. Sometimes we use these terms in exchange. I just heard you're saying you think differently about dance and choreography as two separate practices. Can you just say a few words about that?
I would say that choreography is about dance with an intention. Anyone can dance, and you can, dance can exist as a practice. And I am actually quite interested to hear dancers who speak about, who've never wanted to be choreographers, who are just dancers, and that's completely fine, because that's an art form in itself, and it's a practice that is important, and without it, choreography wouldn't exist. So for me, that's the distinction. I think it's about celebrating those who work with and for and through their bodies for choreographers. Choreography for me becomes it's already like an architecture. It becomes something that's about intention, what to do with the dance in time and space, and also in my view, who are we doing this for? And then we can start thinking about choreography as an assemblage of different then concepts, methodologies, whether it's for creation, for viewership or spectatorship, and also preservation, and different mechanisms of realizing choreography, whether it's through scores or improvisation, or all these other bodies of reflection that constitute the disciplines of choreography, which do exist obviously in dance. As a performer would work with some of those tools, but the intention is not to create necessarily, it's not the responsibility of the dancer to do
Mm,
all this other
mm,
things. So for me, this is the difference. And I think sometimes it's important also to see how choreography has been, I wouldn't say recuperated, but how choreography as a tool for thinking the body has been invited in other disciplines, such as we know, performance and visual arts. So and it's not dance, it's choreography. And yes, dance can be part of it, but very often there was no dance at all, because there was no, very often can be, there was a time where there was no movement at all. So I think that's for me the difference. And I think dance has the capacity to together to create that kind of coming together, and to create this uh, you know feeling in common, or experiencing this, what we call the kinesthetic empathy. um, so that's very valid. I think choreography can orchestrate that in a good way. Choreography can craft or anticipate or guide, I guess, that experience with more precise tools. So I'm not differentiating them to say one is opposed to the other. No, they are like intertwined, but it's more the intention that defines one or the other. And I think if we think of what a dance house does, if it only does something for dance, that's great, but it might not be enough. If it only does something for choreography, great, but then you'd call it a center for choreographic development or something. I think a dance house, if it wants to be a place of gathering and a place of accessible, and to invite people to participate and engage with their bodies through their bodies, it needs to do both. And these are the most successful examples that I have seen in my experience, when both come together. And it's not always, you don't have to always do something with the choreographic intention, um, but the dance needs to operate its magic. So yeah, I guess that's the difference that I make.
yeah. For many years, you have been running a dance house Melbourne in Australia, which is very far from us. But I was wondering what, from this experience, what kind of recognitions about dance choreography did you had? What do you have any particular examples of how relevant the dance house has been for Melbourne, for the local dance community, but also for this enlarged dance family, which can be the whole town. What How did you perceive your role as an artistic director of the house?
It's a very good question. And for this, I have to tell you a little bit about the history of this dance house, because when I arrived in 2011, I arrived and I was entrusted already with looking at its legacy, because when I arrived, it was the year when it was celebrating its 20 years of existence. So it is the only dance house in Australia as such. It might be a big country, but the ecology is it's not necessarily as rich as we could see maybe in Europe. And what's really interesting to know, it was that it was created, inspired by the models of artist studios in New York. So the three choreographers was created by artists to give a place to work to artists. That's what the intention was. It started it's a very modest dance house. It's in a building that was given to them, and continues to be so, by the city of Yarra, which is the city next to Melbourne. So it's like a municipality of Melbourne, and it was given for free. So it used to be, I think it was some sort of town hall, and the city decided to give this space to the artists. It's not very centrally located in Melbourne, but it's not far either. It's very modest, and what really guaranteed the longevity of this initiative, and because it still continues, it's the fact that it was given for a symbolic rent. So the rent hasn't gone up by $5 in the 10 years that I was artistic director, and that's really important to know, because as you might know, Australia has one of the most expensive real estate prices in the world.
Oh,
So
really?
if you get funding, for instance, from the city or the government to run a space, And I don't know, 70% of that goes into paying the rent to someone who owns the building, which you have a dance house, or even paid back to the city, which also happens, which I think sometimes is a bit
Yeah, it does happen.
ridiculous. It's kind of like you're giving me a gift, but actually, no, it's always like, what is the circulation of money? But so the reason why this dance house has stayed on for so long, it's because it was a political decision to allow for a space, a very affordable space to exist for artists to have where to practice, to meet together, and to invite audiences in. Very simple. And that's what it has been doing for the last 20, now almost 30 years soon. And for me, I arrived with this responsibility of having seen how much it had built, how much it was part of the fabric of the ecosystem. And this is where you see how, we talk about institutions as organizations, but we forget that in organizations we have organ, and it's organ. What does an organ do? It connects. An organ doesn't exist in itself, doesn't live if it's by itself. It needs connection to other organs. So that's what this institution, well, I don't like to call it institutions. For that reason, I like to call it organization. That's what he has done. As one of the previous board members, but also an artist in this organization, she was saying, there's not one important dance maker in Melbourne or even Australia that has not the name of dance house in their resume. So this is it, and for me, I think I tried to remain true to, it was I felt invested with a mission to stay true to the vision that was the anchoring kind of ground of this organization, which was to be, as I said, a connector and a transmitter at the same time. And I think I was lucky enough to become friends with one of the co-founders, and I felt that she was kind of watching over me to make sure that I stay the course, and I stayed true to what she wanted to do, and make sure that the initiative, that it's still the artist centric, that it's about the artist. So more than half of the artists part of the board that I would report to were artists. So we trained artists to be able to have governance skills, because who knows, who are the best to know what is needed or what a dance house can do? Well, it's artists, obviously in dialogue with others, but it's important to not forget that a dance house is there to service the artists and through them audiences, but this is the order.
Mm.
And over the years, I think what I've tried to do is to use this house, to use this house to make it a home and to bring opportunities to artists. The landscape is very different to what I knew before I moved from France. So each time it was about ensuring that over time the organization knew how to remain porous and adaptable and malleable to respond to the shifts of what the artists were experiencing, because you're not otherwise, it's an ecology, so you're not stuck. So I can observe over 10 years, some initiatives that we started, I don't know, at the beginning, well, we had to let go of some still continue today because they're really important. And some of the things that we have built, again, are solid enough to have stayed on when the new artistic director came after me. So I think it's really important to understand that we are custodians of something when we arrive in this institution. We have an obligation to think ahead and to build the institutional memory of whatever is happening, so that it's solid enough to continue after us, but at the same time that we have mechanisms embedded in such a way that it keeps the breathing going, because there's nothing worse than building beautiful institutions and beautiful architectures, and they look like splendid, and then you go in and they're empty, or you feel like, oh, what they are cold. And I know so many places like this, and I'm sure you do too. So something there is about how you I think it comes back to the question of hospitality, how you are crafting this invitation to both the artists and audiences, and make it a home, I guess.
Mm-hmm. But the situation in Warsaw is slightly different. I mean, quite different. As you already know, we didn't have a institution in Warsaw ever. So it's gonna be the first one. It's something super exciting. We feel like we are writing the history, but at the same time, the community does not have maybe all the skills necessary to jump in fully. So it's learning by doing process, and also curating a regular venue. It's a new practice. I mean, I had a privilege to exercise it in Poznan for a given time, 17 years, but also in a totally different context of a private foundation, not being connected officially to any city council or overall politics also of the city. I think that there is a lot of challenges ahead of the teams that are going to run now the pilot year. If you would imagine yourself in this situation, how would you approach this kind of a challenge? What would be the first things you would think of as a curator, as an artistic director of a place, knowing also how big the expectations towards the venue are?
For me, it's all about dialogues. I think dialogue. I think what we really find interesting. I actually see it as an exciting challenge, and I think we work best when you know with these kinds of yeah. Creative. It's a creative challenge, and I think this is where we're at our best as curators or artistic directors and artists. It's about working together with the artists, but also with the funders and the local political decision makers, to understand that this is an ecosystem that cannot exist if it's not, if this the coherence of the dialogue is there. And I think we have to trust also the funders that they might not be indeed dance specialists, but I think if they've already invested in this in this, for this house to be or to become something in the city, it means that the most difficult step has been has been taken. Difficult because it's always about starting something. If you don't see the need for a dance house to exist, then the work is harder. They have seen the value of it. So for me now, it's how this is this dialogue is about what the city would like to see achieving at this house, for this house to achieve, because I think what is important probably from a political perspective is to have a thriving city where artists can work in somewhere in the heart of the city, or quite. You don't want your artists to be parked outside in whatever, I don't know, disused factories. There are independent centers, and you never see their work. What you want to have is a sort of living ecology, like living ecology, that you can see people can be invited in to see, yes, to see a show that's fully finished and looks great on stage, but also rehearsals, or also, I don't know, there can be some artists who do residencies by the river, or so all these encounters that actually bring dance on an everyday in an everyday kind of situation, that kind of says, well, actually everyone can be concerned with this, can participate in it, it's accessible. So it actually does what a politician is if they do their job well, is supposed to be doing, to think the city and the context for the city, for the citizens of the city to become aware, engage, responsible, to inhabit their own city, which is, and not just live in it, to inhabit it. And how else if not in this kinds of in with this kind of presence? And for me, this is where I think it's important as artistic decision makers to not see them as opposed to us. It's how it's you co-construct something together. It can't work if it's not it can't work if it's not done together. And I think it's our responsibility to pass on the message that certain things do cost money. You can't just have artists I don't know, being in a unpaid artists, or that to make people understand that a practice of a dance, it needs everyday training. It needs to be able to return to it, to practice the body in between projects. So this is our responsibility, I think. of course, when you open a place, there are all these expectations. I think I think I don't know where I would start. Probably I would start also with seeing where what how it can, yeah, how it can be a what also people want. It's not to give them what people want, but it's to see what's missing. Maybe I think we live in a world that's so disembodied. We're all on our phones, and AI is running our lives now, and you can't have anything that's not curated already. Like if you see a Netflix movie and you see 25 that kind of look like it and that you like, or the same with books. So what is the capacity for curiosity and for being present differently in a city
Mm.
that this house can enlighten? And I guess I would find that as an exciting challenge if I were a politician or a financial decision maker in this project. And I think there is this danger that we think, oh, these people, they think like economists, or there has to be a return on investment. It has to be, of course, it has to be a financially viable institution, and of course, um, you don't want to just run very expensive projects and in 2 years you need to shut it down because you don't know how to, you've wasted the funds that it has been granted. Of course not. It's about perhaps doing more smaller and more again targeted but porous things that invite people to be part of it, to be there. There are so many clever choreographic and artistic mechanisms to invite people in. I mean, this is what we do. So I think it's building trust in time that it can be a place of gathering and a lighthouse, as you say, and a lighthouse and an anchor at the same time. And it's only through the body that we become, I think, responsible citizens. I've never seen, you can't, yeah, I don't think it's possible in this idea of polis, how we understand our presence in the cité. I don't think it's possible without a thinking through the body. And I think currently we're also seeing a thinking of the world through dance, but through choreographic thinking. I think we can no longer dissociate climate change from our bodies, and then how we raise awareness of what does it mean for an artist to come and be there for a day, for instance. Is it possible to function like this, or do we want to change a little bit our habits too? So then what does it mean for an artist to be maybe present in this new dance house for a month, let's say?
Yeah.
It might not cost so much more. What does it mean for instance, if we think what are the other practices that we don't know about? Because we also have this tendency of thinking contemporary dance needs to be this or this or that. Well, maybe not. So what is it that maybe something that happens in a, I don't know, in a mall that, that's probably true with what we call urban practices, has as much value to be maybe not put on a stage, because that would be recuperating it, but maybe it can be invited in. So like, what happens if you invite all these practices, and then you can see a ballet lover sitting next to an urban, like a hip hop practitioner. What is that so impossible? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. You have actually been researching for some time and writing your doctoral thesis, and it has a beautiful title, Fair Corps Making Dance Present, Scores for Theorizing Dance Curating. And I'm actually particularly, wanted to ask you about this idea of mission, task, making dance present, which of course I imagine through the house and that becomes home, that welcomes not only artists but also audiences in, and creates us a one big community of people interested in dance, is the way of making dance present. But since you've been working on some scores around dance curating, I was curious, what did you found and learn? What kind of scores did you discover, or how did you, collecting this knowledge, reflect back on the role of the curating and curators, especially particularly when they run houses?
Yes, for me, I realized as I started, it wasn't the initial subject that I wanted to explore, interestingly. And I realized that this practice that we do that we don't even know what to call it, or because it's not theorized, doesn't exist as a discipline, and even as a practice. We, as let's call ourselves artistic directors, because I think curators is, again, maybe something else, and I'll get to that. I think it's interesting to see, well, how do we think critically and self-reflexively about what we do in our positions at when we run institutions of whichever kind, whether they are called dance houses or not. How can we work creatively, self-reflexively and critically if we don't have mechanisms for assessing our work, for testing our responsibilities, for discussing? Even we don't have professional bodies of, professional entities that represent us, like look at with the visual arts and all that. We don't have concepts necessarily, like if you look at, again, curatorial studies, everything is super theorized. We don't have any of those. We don't being a dance presenter, or whatever we want to call ourselves, it's not taught in any school. Like there's no diploma, still, or it's bundled in with performance and other things. And I think it's dangerous, because these are different expressions and not what dance does. So for me, the question was, well, what is it? Who are we really? Because we all have very, very different titles. We're artistic directors with head of programming, creative producers, God knows how many different things. So, but then we're all trained, as most of us, as arts managers, and then some of us as art historians, or other fields, or people come from an artistic practice. So what is it that we do? So what is it that we do if we call ourselves dance presenters? Because that's what we do, we present dance. So for me, then I played with this question of, well, presenting dance, there's presence in presenting. So what is it really to make dance present? And that forced me to see, okay, well, if I'm analyzing this, how do I want this to be analyzed? And I didn't want to use any theorizing concepts, as people often do in when they do doctoral exercises. So for me, it was something that needed a methodology that needed to stay very flexible and very porous, because I think there's not one definition, and the context is so different, and the bodies are always so situated, and therefore the institutions that, or the organizations that work with them. So for me, I came back to, again, a choreographic tool. We were speaking about them earlier. A score. So a score in dance is, in choreography, is something that sets the movement, sets the direction, but doesn't fix it. You take a score, which can be written in, yes, we have about 3 or 4 different notation systems, but it can be anything really. It can be verbal, it can be a drawing, it can be anything. People can interpret it differently, because bodies are each time different. So for me, it was identifying, I guess, what would you call them? Something in movement, something that's got a particular assemblage of something that's in movement that I could look at and analyze, that becomes more like a tool for thinking, rather than, oh, here's this typology and here's this. It's more like a topology rather than a typology. So I analyzed different types of programming, and one of them was the programming that a dance house would do. And I called it, because I gave names to make it easier, and I gave it the name of a lighthouse programming. Why? Because each time I looked about 6 different dance houses, I think, in my research. So each time I realized that it was truly a presence in the city. Each time I looked at the ones in Pavillon, Oslo, about 6 of them. I can't remember now which ones. They were really a heavy, well, not a heavy, but a very distinct presence in the life of a city. They people know of them, people come to them. So most of them have succeeded, I guess, this mission of gathering people around and building the autonomy of a discipline, and giving it profile, and giving it, and actually they were the pride of the cities that hosted them. I mean, Pavillon now it took such a long time for it to exist. Of course, everyone knows about the Pavillon. Dansenhus in Oslo, it's a beautiful building. It's the same thing. Stockholm is the same thing. So they are really, we can even talk about cultural tourism if we want, because people come to see shows. So it's got value. These places have value that go beyond the choreographic field, because they can choreograph tourism, they can choreograph, urban experiences. They become part of the fabric of a city. They can become objects of pride, municipal pride, you know. So it's they have everything to they do the same job as any other nice buildings, you know, or like a museum. And I think what's really interesting is to see that dance houses are places for live bodies. Museums, not always. I have, you know, there's this famous French decolonial thinker, writer, Françoise Vergès, and she says, you know, museums are cemeteries for obvious reasons. And I'm thinking, well, a dance house could never be a cemetery of any sort. I mean, yes, an institution can become ossified, fossil, you know, like a fossil, but highly unlikely. It's people, it's bodies coming, working. It's alive. It's live and alive at the same time. And in this aliveness, yeah, there's this invitation that cannot not be visible. So yeah, that's why I can go very more in detail, but I think it's important to see also the mission of these houses that do everything in general. They do residencies, they do talk, debates, shows, productions, international projects. They're a place of presence, and they cover every single aspect of dance making and dance thinking, because that's what they're set up to do. And that's also very valuable, because it's, you know, it's an ecosystem. You don't want to just do, oh, here we just do the research and talks, and we open a studio, and then, oh, and here we just do shows. No, it's this wholeness as well that guarantees the coherence of such projects and their longevity, because obviously we see they're working, you know. There's so many examples. I don't know if I mean, if we look at the European Dance House Network, I mean, of course, they're all very different and different contexts, but unless the political climate is problematic, I'm not seeing any of them. No one goes and says, oh, you know, these are dated models. They can no longer exist, because there's something in the mechanisms of these dance houses that has been maybe cleverly projected, that they can renew themselves. And maybe because, yeah, they work with bodies, and they're as alive as organisms as the bodies that they host and they were created for.
I totally understand your affiliation with this metaphor of lighthouse coming from Andavier, Genève, but I hear now ending up as one of the, yeah, names, ideas, concepts, metaphors for the practice of a presenter of dance, the artistic director. For me, because I also privately in my practice work so much with light, it's also a very, very powerful metaphor. And I think it's not only allows us to make dance present and visible, which is very, very important also to make dance visible, but it also always makes me think about the ability to make things understandable, and enlightening in a way also how to experience, how to be together, how to practice this art of hosting and being hosted and contribute to the house, to the home. I was wondering whether you have in your experience any kind of projects in mind that could be an inspiration to reapply them in this new context of a place for dance, a lighthouse for dance in Warsaw. Any particular examples, maybe also from the research you run, but also from your own experience of a project that not only present dance, but also help us to understand it better?
Look, I think there are so many examples, and I think we have to also be careful with this, like with all metaphors, you know, this enlightenment thing. I think we shouldn't be seeing ourselves through these organizations as being there to show the way to people and let us tell you how to feel about dance. Or not at all. I think this is not at all, should not be the intention. I mean, it can, you know, we've seen it, and it's a bit paternalistic, but it's dangerous. And I think what we need to see these places as is obviously a mechanism to open a door and to extend an invitation, and from there people make their own journeys and experiences. But again, it's our responsibility to choreograph this coming together, this togetherness or being in common, that then through dance, it's this percorps that I talk about, which is not so much, it's probably untranslatable in English, because it's about being, making, feeling through the body, with the body, is the body is thought, thought is body, as this French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy said. So it's like, it's really this, it can only be because we're all together watching dance and potentially part of it. But I want to mention 2 or 3 examples very briefly, what institutions like this can do without necessarily being called a dance house, but playing the same role as an anchor and as a lighthouse. I was in 2017, I had the enormous opportunity to go to Brazil and Rio, and I discovered Lia Rodriguez's, the Brazilian choreographer Lia Rodriguez. She has a venue, a place which is really in the Favela do Mar, which is a very obviously poor place. And she built this with, I think, money that she, I wouldn't say detoured from her European commissions, but, I think at some point she would say, oh, I'm going to do these works that will have huge sets. And then she never did the sets. And then the money were invested in building this school choreographic center, and where she actually gets the kids of the streets, and that this is the people who become dancers. This is one example of what he can do. I liked how in a recent project that I did recently with my colleague from Mozambique, to Tembe, he was alerting us to the fact that, in Europe we have productions that cost up to 500,000 euros to put on, which is great. Why not? We need them. But with that money, he could open a choreographic center or finalize the construction of a choreographic center in Mozambique, which would be the only one that exists. Or Idio Shishaba, who's, again, a Mozambique dancer who recently got the prize money from the Seda prize, dance prize from the Gulbenkian Foundation. And with that money, he's building a dance house in his region, in Mozambique. So we see these urgencies. I would also say dance will happen regardless. Dance can happen anywhere. People will come to watch dance. It's been like this for centuries, since we were, dance had other missions than, being a show on a stage. So I'm not worried about that. I'm worried that if these places don't exist, it will take longer. The experience will be more disembodied. We'll forget that we have bodies, and the work will get harder and harder for us, artists and curators, to bring people to this awareness. And I think it's urgent that we have this lighthouses that kind of show the way. If it shows anything, it's an invitation to show us that we have a body. And I think that's why these places are important. You can make a dance house temporarily anywhere. I'm thinking of the recent project that I had the joy of being a co-curator of, and to also coordinate the forum, the new experimental project that we've just finalized at the Lyon Dance Biennale, which was an invitation extended to 5 curators from continents outside Europe. We all invited 5 artists who have practices that are really not necessarily spectacular, that they're really something that's really rooted in the places where they come from. So, our guests from Brazil, original bomber crew, there's nothing in their region, Teresina, which is not the most privileged, nothing. They work in the streets with things that come off the streets, violence, addiction. And they make an amazing dance that's called Dança Quebrada. And yes, we can see it in Europe on a stage, but that's not what we did. We asked them to be present and invest this venue that's called Cité Internationale de la Gastronomie. And for a week, these 5 artists that we've invited exchanged their practices, created these rituals of co-presence, all these unusual invitations to audiences. We didn't even have to come in as curators and say, oh, this is what we're doing. Not at all. The artists led everything. People came, people got it. We didn't have to do anything, really. It was probably the most rewarding project I've ever done, because all we did was get the artists together, gave them the spaces, ensured that the spaces looked or felt like what they wanted. Yes, we had conversations that expanded on their thinking, but it was dialogues that they were imagining or curating, and it worked really well. And for a week, this place, that's not a dance place, but it used to be it was a hospital and a monastery before, was a place of healing and of care. Well, we worked with, if this is the place, and our topic was hospitalities, it just came together. And for a week, that place became a house of dance, but also a place of care. And people saw it. And yeah, that's rewarding. So it can be done like this. it's harder. It would have not been the same if we had done it at the Maison de la Danse in Lyon, because it's conceived to function in a certain way, that venue. So we just created a different flow within this other venue that was more centrally located, and people were invited. It needed to be open on the streets for people to come in. It worked beautifully. So
What I
it's
also
no way.
hear from this story is a very important realization that we, I think, also through establishing a home for dance, could become more present in the awareness of organizers, but also citizens, is that dance does generate knowledge, that
Oh,
artists do generate knowledge. It's not so obvious for many people. I mean, it's also an opportunity to give an insight into what does it really mean to work professionally as a choreographer, how complex is the practice, and also how transdisciplinary it is, and that actually constantly the knowledge is being generated, and hopefully through the dance house it can also be shared.
absolutely. I mean, you couldn't design an urban space if you don't understand choreography, and look at any protest or any group of people in the street. It's already a choreography. So if yeah, it's how we understand it. It's I would invite anyone who works in this fields, architecture, urbanism, to look at choreographic tools of working with bodies in space, because this is proper knowledge. And thankfully, there it's theorized now. We have a few books. There's a great book called, as we know, Social Choreographies. Um, uh, it's all a social choreography. So one day, I hope that political decision makers will see the if they. I'm sure. I mean, it's also knowledge that you hold tacitly, but if you delve into it, you can learn so much more. And even by coming and watching dance, you become so much more aware of the what the body can do. Um, I would invite anyone who's in this, all the decision makers, to not ignore this field, because um, yeah, it's about people, and it's about how people exist in space and in a place. And you can't do a job of an economist or a politician if you don't understand this. And of course, it can be turned to evil purposes if it's too well understood. But it's I think if we understand our responsibility as citizens, and how we position ourselves in the world, and where we stand and how we stand, that's a choreographic stance. And it's, yeah, I would say it's our responsibility to understand it, encourage it, and and extend it as an invitation through these vehicles or catalysts that are the dance houses.
Mm. It's a beautiful vision, and I'm so looking forward to experience the home of dance in Warsaw,
Hi.
uh, that will make dance present, but also that will help us, audiences, citizens, finally rediscover that we do have bodies and that we can feel them, and that we, in this totally digitalized world, indeed so much needs to insist on coming back and coming back and coming back to the body we have, in the light of the multiple crises we go, and the future of that is so uncertain. Turning to the body is something we can hold on to and trust and believe and practice together. Thank you very much for all your amazing thoughts, and I hope we will soon meet each other at the inauguration of a dance house in Warsaw, the Pavilion at next to the Vistula River. I'll be there. We're gonna dance together, and
And
I
wait.
hope, yeah, I hope we are able to forward the messages and also your arguments why we need a dance house also higher up, to share it with the wider community and audiences. I can't wait
Thank
to do
you.
this.
Thank you
Thank you
for the
very much.
opportunity.